gonna begin the afternoon session again. Thank you for joining us. We are gonna talk about a digital transformation at this historic site of Hongneung Bio Hub. Sorry that we do not see you in person. For the sake of the safe operation of the conference, we are streamlining the session. This is day 1. In the morning, we had opening ceremony and session 1, followed by session 2. And thank you for joining us in the afternoon as well. And welcome all of you. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment or Q&A section. We have one more discussion session before we wrap up today's conference, so please don't forget to leave your comment. So let's begin session 3, whose topic is next generation medical devices or therapies. So first speaker is from Ybrain, CTO and CEO Kiwon. He will be talking about the Electroceuticals, the future of miniaturized medical device. Good afternoon, my name is Kiwon from Ybrain. Today I'm going to talk about electroceuticals. What are the electroceuticals? It electrifies the brain through the brain waves so that it can have a benefits like pharmaceuticals. So I'm going to talk about its future. Whenever we talk about new technology and innovation, we call it disruptive innovation. To some of them, disrupt the market. But as for the disruptive innovation, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's different from what we know. One of the examples is transistor radio. The transistor radio didn't have a good quality sound, and it was inferior in terms of an audio device. It was not fit for the audio devices, so it was sold as a radio for the youth. But with the advancement of the technologies, it has been adopted as a new product. And as for the vacuum tube audio, once we have a transistor audio, the quality of the sound is not good, but it has a room for improvement. But it takes about 10 million won for commercialization. And if you are approached by that proposal, you may find it difficult to make a decision because it requires a huge amount of investment. And while other companies hesitate going into the market, and this market will be dominated by the company who has that technology. And as for this kind of change or things, it may take place in the healthcare market. Let me first talk about the environment of the healthcare market. As you know, unlike other industries, the beneficiaries are not necessarily the payers. There are segregation of the receiver, provider, and financial or payer when it comes to a healthcare system or market. As for the Korean market, we have an insurance coverage provided by the government, whereas the healthcare service itself is provided by the government in UK, Canada, and Sweden. So we have a different healthcare market schemes. And as for the types of healthcare system, different countries have adopted different systems. Let me have a look at the indicators. As for Korea, we have a very good indicator. As you can see, the expenditure per capita is quite small, very small compared to that of the USA, whereas Korean people have a number of chances to see the patient. And then the mortality of the infant is very low. So when we have a look at the healthcare system, you may believe that Korean system has a very good performance. However, from the perspective of new technology, this kind of new healthcare system does not necessarily represent a good system for the new technologies. Other than the indicators or indexes, I believe that the healthcare system itself has some kind of aspect of the culture. To the left, we have the number of hospital beds in Korea. As you see, we have a number of hospitals that have more than 1,000 beds. What about those hospitals in the US? As you see here, the number of beds occupied or owned by each hospital is much smaller, even though the population of the country is much bigger. As you see here, the size of the hospital in Korea is much bigger than that of the US. And what about the awareness of the healthcare service of Korea and US? As you can see here, the number of cesarean sections is very higher, even though the cesarean section is more expensive than the natural delivery. If you go to the US, Canada, and other countries whose expenses are much higher, you notice that the number of people who get the cesarean section is much higher in Korea than that of the other countries. So here we can say that cost does not itself explain the reason why we have a higher rate of cesarean section. As for Korea, we have a cost-effective, high-performance healthcare system. That's what we can say from the data that we have shared now. We have the private hospitals run based on the insurance system operated by the government. And as for the digital therapies or electroceuticals, the number of electroceuticals that are used in the Korean market is much smaller than that of the USA. However, with the aging population and new systems introduced into the market, such as covering the dementia care by the government, I believe that this ratio is sure to increase. The depression market has grown to reach more than 20 million, and globally 12 trillion is the market size of the depression. So I believe that the electroceuticals market is very promising. Then how much advanced the electroceutical products are? As you see, the pharmaceutical and electroceuticals can be applied to central nervous system indications or conditions. And as for the CNS-related diseases, the success rate is quite low. That must be one of the reasons why the alternative technologies has drawn attention of pharmaceutical companies to develop products to tackle CNS indications or diseases. As for the brain, they have electro signaling system, as you see on the slide. So without using chemical compound, we can control the activities of the brain by applying electrical stimulation.
사례는 뇌신부 자극술입니다.
And one of the success story is for the Parkinson's disease. As you see here, we have somebody who has a very serious symptom of shaking hand, and the brain is open to implant electrostimulation device, and once the stimulation device is turned on, all the symptoms are gone. As you see here, it has been introduced into the market years ago. But what about the depression or cognitive impairment or dementia? Are they willing to get the surgery to get such device implanted? No, not many people are willing to do so. So we have minimally invasive and non-invasive stimulation devices developed, and it has continued to evolve to see a very, very small device of stimulation developed so that patient can carry no matter where they go. So the migraine or depression can be treated with a small device. And the market is growing, and it will continue to grow once it is connected with the home care market. And over the years, the representative companies who have developed, one of them is Galvani, and Google and JSK have created the company to develop various products, and Parkinson and migraine have been the conditions that are targeted by these electroceutical products. Innovation is taking place in this market. Why? Because the approval process has been streamlined. Compared to the conventional drug, it takes around 8 years for them to be approved, and the approval rate is as low as 10%. But as for the electroceutical devices, they are rather safe, and its time to market is only 4 to 5 years, and the approval rate is as high as 70%. So even small companies are venturing into this area. And these days, what draws our attention as an important competitive edge is scalability. Today we are talking about digital transformation, and now using the platform, it can reach hundreds or thousands of people at the same time, and such kind of scalability has drawn attention.
Ybrain은 이런 디지털 플랫폼 기반의 전자기기 상용화
Where are we positioned? We have an electroceutical platform. At the middle of the screen, we have the electroceutical platform module, and migraine and depression and other conditions can be controlled. So for 13 minutes per day, it works like a pharmaceutical company, and the owner can operate. And for the major depressive symptoms, we got the approval for our product, and we are going to commercialize this product in October this year. In order to commercialize our product, we have made a lot of efforts. First, we try to demonstrate safety. It can be even used in the elderly patients or children. And compared to the other medical devices, how safe our product is. That's what we wanted to identify, and these are the safety guidelines that we have contributed to establishing. And clinical trials are done not only in the clinical setting but also at home setting. So for this kind of devices or electroceuticals, it can be as effective as medical products, and the remission rate that we have achieved was very promising and impressive. And based on the outcomes of such clinical trials, we have applied for the approval, and we have expanded its application so that it can be used in the cognitive impairment and other indications. And the clinical trials covering such indications will be concluded next year. We have schizophrenia and stress and other indications for which we are running clinical trials in the Korean market. And within 3 years, I believe that we can commercialize this product. We have conducted these clinical trials in the Korean market, so we get the approval in Korea. But from next year, we are trying to enter the global market.
이런 활동들은 이제 사실 중요하게는 의료계의 수용도가 중요하기 때문에
What is important is the acceptance of the medical field. That's why we are trying to build evidence of our electroceutical product. And technology-wise, this technology has been commercialized or in the commercial stage. And what shall we do in order to make those electroceutical products widespread in the market? As for the electroceutical products that have been developed, their efficacy has been proven through clinical trials. And some of them has been proven in the US market. And recently, telemedicine and at-home electroceuticals have drawn attention. And in Korea, the migraine, major depressive disorders are the main indications for which we will get the approval. And we are accumulating the data. And once we have a electroceutical product, a new one, we may utilize as a monotherapy or in combination with the conventional drug. Or you can combine it with the cognitive therapy offered by the medical center. So up to now, in the partnership with the pharmaceutical companies, we do the co-promotion of our products. So in order to penetrate the mainstream market, we establish a partnership with a Korean counterpart and another one in Japan. And what we need to think of at this stage is this. As for the electroceutical product or other medical devices, how do we enter the market? What will be the best approach? As for the big companies, they have entered the market. So in the mainstream market, what shall we do? What shall we do in order to make sure that our product is used in the mainstream market? Compared to the conventional medicine, one of the advantages of the electroceutical product is that we can get it approved much easily or faster. However, we do not have enough data set for the pharmaceutical products. Whenever they commercialize the product, they analyze cost to benefit cost assessment
의료
and then
서비스로서 안착이 되는
they
것에 대해서
can enter the market at
말씀드렸던
once.
민영화적인 장점으로 인해서
However,
전자약이나
our
기술 치료제는 아마도
products such as
메인스트림을 받는 데 상당한 시간이 걸릴 것으로
electroceutical
생각이
products, it
됩니다.
will
이런
take
기존
time for
약물에
us to
준하는 대규모 데이터셋을
join
확보를
the
하고
mainstream market, mainly because we do not have enough data in the first place. And
이런 관점에서 한국 시장은 한국의 의료
once we
환경은
get the approval, we have to get it reimbursed as well. So in that context, I believe that Korean market is the best
급여가 아닌
and worst
기급여로서의 행위를 하기에는
testing bed
그런 제도가 전혀 거의 준비가 되어 있지
because we do not have
가장 어려운
regulations in place
사실은
for the
어떤
electroceutical
특정
products. And
국가보험제도
for
또는 정부
the
주도의
specific
어떤 의료
technology,
프랙티스로 빠르게 정립을 하기에는
in order
어떤
for it to
환경보다
be
좋은
established
환경으로
as a very good practice or standard of care, I believe that we have
코로나19에서
a very good
진단키트 사례가
potential.
있습니다. 사실 코로나 진단키트를 최초에 도입할 때 많은
One of the
논란이
examples
있었습니다.
is the
아직 불완전한
diagnostic
기술이
kit
아니냐.
for the
부정확도에
COVID-19.
대해서
When we
얘기했지만
introduced it first into the market,
치과노가가 가능한
many people are
최소한의
concerned
기술을
about the
통해서
safety.
한국은 누구보다 빠른 속도로
But using
의료
the
현장에
technology that we have,
그 어떤
Korea
국가보다
succeeded in
많은
introducing the diagnostic
결과적으로는
tools
가장
much
빠르게
earlier than
진행했습니다.
other countries.
그래서
So in that
이런
regard,
새로운
we made a
기술을
good success.
펼치는
And I
이런
believe that we can
형태의
follow
아마도
suit
한국형 형식이 아닐까
of the
생각합니다.
diagnostic tool,
기술 치료제,
and this can be
전자약도
called a Korean
이런 국가 주도의
type
프랙티스와
of
데이터 기반
innovation.
혁신을 위한 준비를
So
해야
the
되는
government-led initiatives may add value to the project that we implement as a private companies. Thank you. This concludes my
디지털
presentation.
전환을 준비하며 차세대 의료기기의 미래에 대해서 우리가 그려보고
Yes,
있습니다.
we are sharing our views on the direction of medical devices, innovation in the era of smart healthcare. And the first presentation was given by CEO Kiwon Lee and CTO Kiwon Lee of Ybrain. Next presentation will be done by CTO YongKeun Park, the co-founder of Tomocube, on the topic of AI microscope. Yes, good afternoon. I am YongKeun Park, CTO of Tomocube. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm going to talk about AI microscopy done by our company Tomocube, and also cover the market trend and different developments. Because the topic is too broad, so I will focus on how AI microscopy can bring new innovation in therapeutics and in diagnostics in traditional microscopy. As you know, past decade, new innovative diagnostics and therapeutics were developed. So 3 different information data is used for dynamics. Illumina, QADEM, and other technology use genomics, and BD, Roche, and J&J use proteomics data. So they're making a lot of profits using those technology. But traditionally, based on morphology of cells, diagnoses were made, so that is traditional area of pathology, and tissue, bacteria, and cell, and different diseases are at play in this morphology area. So it is very traditional field, quite new to innovation. So they didn't have a lot of innovation taking place. So they are stuck with very old-fashioned way of doing diagnosis using morphology. So actual human being will look at the images through microscopy, and they cross-check what they see with the image they have in their brains, and then lead to diagnosis. So that's what has been done for the past 100 years, and that's still being used. Do you think it will be still used in 5-10 years of time? We beg to differ, so that's why we are presenting new technology. The reason being is a lot of big data and new AI technologies were brought to the surface, And currently, cell analysis are done like this. So they prepare cells and they use different reagents or different stimulants for cells. They apply that to cells, and to understand the reaction at the cell level, they use dyes or fluorescent dyes and look at this through a microscope, and qualitatively and very passively a user or a professional will analyze the outcome. But the future that we envision is that new technology will be applied here, departing from a past practice of staining. We will go to the AI-based digital staining. So using big data AI, data that are extracted from this machine or cells will be processed according to the purposes different researchers would have. Seemingly, the microscope are progressing very, very slowly, but internally there are new progresses made. There are new developments. In the past, the visibility of a microscope was really low. In 2053, bifield microscopy or phase contrast microscopy was developed. They are still used, but they do not have any molecular data made available. Recently, fluorescent microscopy were introduced. So researchers manipulate genetics of the cells, and they understand which protein is located where. And at the hospital, particular dye is used to stain the cell to understand tumor and other normal cells out of tissue. So as we research into this field, maybe the outcome can be analyzed using AI. These activities were done already in the US and other countries. Because they try to utilize the images gained from the traditional apparatus, there was limitation. The staining will not let cell live longer, and because of the staining, the data has restricted use. For example, the cell staining method done in Nasan Medical Center or Samsung Hospital will be all different because their protocols will be different. So how we normalize dye information and methodology normalization or standardization is the key. So we use a 3D holotomography. So without pre-processing or without staining, we can analyze alive cells. We also look into reproducible and quantitative analysis of refractive index. So the images gained from this apparatus or device is well suited for AI application. So we first introduced to the market a research purpose microscope. It can take a refractive image in 30 seconds. So using X-ray, for example, you can understand this in the same way as tomography. Using X-ray, you recompose the 3D image. We use laser. Instead of looking at human body, we look at inside of cells. We can measure different cell components, neural cells, stem cell. So all of those cells that defy staining or dye can be analyzed, and many different pictures can be taken in a single second. We can access formerly unavailable data in a fast way. Because the amount of enormous use of AI is a must, and that is core to what we do. In AI image processing, there are many different algorithms, and we have 3 different classifications and use this to our purpose. First is segmentation, second is classification, and third is inference. And we use these algorithms and utilize different application algorithms. First is segmentation. I think Google AI is working on this as well. From this 2D picture, if you input that to 3D, AI tool, the AI will discern which one is car, which one is a person. For autonomous driving, this technology is developing really fast. If we apply this to what we do, 3D refractive image can be segmented by AI. They can tell which one is cell membrane and which one is inside the membrane lipid droplet. So as you can see on the screen, you can really take a video of how CAR-T can kill a cancer cell. You can make a discernment between cancer cell and CAR-T cell, effect cell and target cell. So without staining, you can understand ET ratio and continuously monitor and track ET ratio. So a researcher can know synaptical information between different cells without doing manual analysis. The analysis will be done automatically. So all of these color coding is done virtually by AI. So purple is target leukemic B cell, and the sky blue ones are CAR-T cells. So if you expand on this, you can also drive a sub-organelle from different cells. Second is classification. So if you input this picture, AI will tell which one is a cat, which one is a dog, what kind of breed it is. So we are trying to apply this to a communicable disease. So this detailed structure inside a bacteria can be imaged using our machine. So inside composition will be different from one strain to another. So that is the premise on which we build our theory that we can make discernment from different bacteria. In the past, the accuracy ratio was about 80%, but now the algorithm was improved, and out of, for example, 5 different bacteria, 3 bacteria are taken, so the accuracy rate is 99.9%. So after culture of 2 hours, we can also tell if the bacteria will react to antibiotics, or certain antibiotics. So in the past, that took about a week, but now it can be done in 2 hours. So in the past, you had to do blood culture and do the subculture, and you have to do bacteria identification and do blood culture for AST again. So this very elongated process can be done in a very short span of time, and this will enable us to respond to communicable disease in a more effective way. Third is inference. You might have used FaceApp or other inference-related apps. So when you take a picture, you can transform your picture to an opposite sex or a younger age, or image can be changed. So by understanding the properties of the image, you can virtually create something that doesn't exist in reality. According to a Facebook paper that was published a week ago, this improved even further. So against the backdrop of snow, if you input this, you can gain an outcome that you cannot really see with the human eyes. Holopium staining can be done in a very fast way, but the molecular information is missing. So holography, structural imaging is done, and then the fluorescent staining should be done to understand molecular information. So that will compromise the benefit of holography. So when staining is done on cell and tissue, we take holography and molecular data at the same time. If we pair these two without any pre-processing, without any staining, if we just press a button on AI, the outcome that you see will be created. So actin plasma membrane, mitochondria, lipid droplets will shown immediately, and it has very small error compared to the actual. So all of these are virtually color-coded video. Virtual color coding and actual staining has less than 5% variance. And Google AI showed about 96% accuracy, and ours is above 95% all the time. So we are still thinking about what kind of actual innovation we can bring using this technology. The strategy we are taking is that let's get our reputation built in the research area. So to move into the actual clinical field or diagnostics field, we need to have reference cases. So in order to go into the diagnostics or actual clinical field, HT have to build its reputation in the research market before. So when this microscope is used by researchers widely, we can build a reputation that formerly unseen data can be made available. We're already getting the very positive feedback from a lot of researchers. Live cell imaging, although our revenues are not that big yet, we are getting a lot of claims, accolade that our machine can contribute a lot. Building on these references, maybe we can make our technology known in the market, and in the process, we can also bring more perfection to our product. We can spend more time and make our product more perfect and create bigger satisfaction for the users and researchers that will ultimately be beneficial for ourselves as well. So we are looking at AI and holotomography market as currently, research market is the mainstay, and going forward, we are seeking to expand the market by providing high throughput device or high throughput application. We are looking at different pipelines. Broadly, we are looking at solutions in hematology, infectious diseases, and cytopathology and companion diagnosis. To give you one example, we are looking at actual application in CBC. This is number 2 most frequently done test at clinical field. And there is, of course, unmet needs. First, although the number of tests are really high, but 15% of the tests are flagged with error. So you have to do it again and stain the blood sample and analyzed by a human professional. Second, because this is very automated, in a tertiary hospital you do have automated machine, but in a clinics or small hospitals you do not have the machine, so you have to commission that out. And the image data nowadays are being digitized for digital pathology, but this tissue analysis and hematology area, you do not store. There is an unmet needs that you do not want to store physical plates, but store a digitized data. So we are making preparation to conduct a test for clinical trial. So after making a droplet using this cartridge in 3 to 5 minutes of time, holography imaging will be generated, and users do not need to look at this. CBC, red blood cell and white blood cell differential data will be practically displayed on screen. And this will be stored up on the cloud or physical server, so doctors and professionals can access this data no matter where they are. So we look at and analyze cell to get to diagnostics and therapeutics, in morphology and phenotype area, there hasn't been a lot of information. There is a lot of data, but because of lack of available technology, the innovation was a little bit delayed, and we're trying to target this specific market to encourage and bring in new technology. Using holotomography, new type of refractive data, HT microscopy, combining that with AI analysis, we'll be able to create access to previously unavailable data and shorten the diagnostic time. Thank you for your attention.
네, 지금까지 AI 현미경 기술에 대해서 토목큐브의 김홍근 CTO님의
CTO Dr. Park talked about AI microscopy. So we will now move on to the third presentation of session 3. CEO of hutom and professor at Yonsei University, Professor Hyung, will talk about unveiling surgery through digital innovation. So we do have a clinical professional and renowned expert for our speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Hyung. Today I'm going to talk about a digital technology which can be applied to those patients who need to get surgery. Through the digital innovation, we try to change the surgery paradigm. That's the motto of our company. These are the contents of my presentation. I'm going to talk about the technology that we have applied mainly. First, let me talk about the needs of the patients for surgery, especially those people who suffer from the solid tumor. The first treatment option that they have is surgery. But no matter how good a surgery they get, they need to get good management post-surgery. However, the management service that they got varies in terms of the quality. And the surgery itself has different quality. That must be the reason why many patients want to get their surgery from the well-known doctors. But no matter how good a job you do during the process of the surgery, you are not free from complications 100%. But once the complication occurs, it adds up the medical cost significantly. And why it's taken place, why there is a variance in terms of the proficiency of surgeons. The change comes from the system that we have. We have an apprentice system, and I believe that we can change by having a good program that can be applied to the surgery. Because once we have a good hardware, we have a better quality surgery in the industry. Once we have a laparoscopic program introduced, we have a better quality. But still, as for the surgeons, they are trained in the apprentice system. No matter how good a software is available into the market, there is still a gap in terms of the skills of the doctors. So what we aimed at for development was the software using the digital technology. It can be applied to any doctors or surgeons so that we can reduce the gap of the skills of each different doctor or surgeon. So in the end, no matter who performs your surgery, the quality will be high or up to a certain standard. That was the aim of our company, and we have tried to develop the product in order to achieve that. Once you try up-to-date technology, you believe that you get the high-quality surgery, but the difference that we get from it was minimal. More big difference came from the skills that each doctor or surgeons have. So filling the gap is what we wanted to achieve. And for the medical data, we need to have the data accumulated for a certain purpose. Even though we have a huge quantity of data, it's not useless unless it is organized in a certain way. So over the past 10 years, we have accumulated data so that it can serve our purpose. And labeling quality of the data has been optimized so that it can be used for our research. So for the surgery's purpose only, we have accumulated the data, including the surgery images or videotaping of the surgeons done in the operating room. So we assessed the surgeries done in the operating table. That was our starting point. So unlike other companies, we are focusing on the surgery, and assessing the surgery itself was a starting point, as I said, and try to optimize the tools or technology that we develop. And our technology or program are being validated at this moment. And this is the vision. Using the AI technology, and I believe that you share our vision too, for the AI technology, it has been used to improve the patient outcome. That's the goal that we share as well. New technology may not make our life as a doctor easier. However, it can improve this outcome of the patient. And we can also have some systems that can help the doctors as well, because if the doctors find it easier to do their job or operating or doing the surgery, the outcome will be better. So for the sake of the patients and doctors, we try to come up with the new surgical care program that can benefit not only the patients but also the doctors. So we were founded in 2017, and last year our product has been registered and the revenues have started to incur. First, we developed a navigator for surgery. It's much more like the navigator that you use when you drive a car. You know how to drive, but you do not remember the map. And if you go to a new destination, you have to learn the route. That's true for the surgeons as well. Whenever we do the operation, we need to learn the anatomy of the patient, and if you help them to learn it better, their outcome will be better. And we have a surgigram which helps us to assess the video clips of the operation so that we can identify the events in advance and give the feedback to the surgeons. And then the outcome may represent some impact on the patient, so they can be assessed as well. And at the bottom, we have a rear surge and RUS. If you combine them two, you can exercise doing the surgery using the system. Up to now, doctors say that you do not have a chance to run a dry. You do not have a chance to have a dry run of the surgery, but once you have that chance, you will have a better outcome. So our systems will be able to offer that chance for the dry run. This is the navigation software that we have developed. And let's say that we have surgeries, and many of them use robots or laparoscopy. Rather than having an open surgery, we are doing laparoscopic and robotic surgeries, and that they have become mainstream. It has a lot of advantage, but one of the drawbacks is that we do not have a big eye field or visual field. And when we have a patient, we do not have a same visual field on the abdomen, even though we inject the same amount of air. If you have a very big fat man, the image is different from the one that we get from a very slim woman. Would you please click the video clip so that we can play it and have a video played? And before the surgery, we can predict how the abdomen can expand by inflating it. And once we intubate the abdomen, we can inflate the abdomen in order to see the anatomy of the abdomen. Once we have a good anatomical understanding, we can determine the location of the port. And if you do not do a good job at this point, the laparoscopic surgery may fail. As for our products, we have a pneumoperitoneum, very good thorough information before we do the surgery. And in the same patient, we have the same anatomy outcome. But as for the twins, even the twins have a different anatomy of the abdomen. No two people are the same when it comes to the anatomy, which means that no matter how much experience that you have, new patient is new to you. So in the operating table, you can utilize many different technologies. So this is one of the new technologies. The dark red or dark blue represent the blood vessels, but it's inside a fat layer, which makes it difficult for us to visualize it. Once we use the system, we are able to identify the blood vessels and where to access. The red one represents artery, and even a very small arteries can be seen. And the blue one, behind it, we have the blood vessels inside the fat layer. Getting to know the location of the blood vessels is very important. Once you get that information, you can get a shortcut. Otherwise, you have to take a bypass, which can result in a longer operating hours, which means that the patient needs to get analyzed for a longer period or longer time. And as for our system, it can deliver the anatomic information to the doctors. So at least the doctor can have the same or even ground when it comes to the anatomy of the patient. So this is the basic concept on which we develop our technology. Let's say that we expand the belly or abdomen, and on CT, if you get the CT image, the locations are very difficult to spot because it may change as you breathe. So when you do the operation, the anatomy or veins, their locations can be identified, and their relative location distance can be identified using the system. The 3D software made available in the market, we have a lot, but ours is a new one that can be used in the operating table. And the next version is combining our navigation with the surgery camera. So you can have the view of the surgical field real-time basis. We have launched a clinical trial. We have recruited 7 patients up to now. This is different from the ones done by pharmaceutical companies, which means that we have the outcome very quickly. Only 30 days after the clinical trials, we can reveal the outcome. And we have conducted earlier trial recruiting 30 patients, and next one will be implemented across different medical centers across different countries. That's what we are preparing for, and we will validate our product's efficacy. And once the efficacy is proven, I believe that it can be widely used in the clinical setting. Another project that we are working on is assessing the operating videos, how long the surgery was taken and how much blood loss there was per case. All the data can be collected, assessing the operating clip, and we can also assess all the different steps of the operation. We also can predict the outcome of the surgery in the end. Assessing these kind of video clips of the operation requires very complicated process because we have different factors and components such as the movement of the devices and anatomical structures of the patient and the procedures of the surgery. You need to have a deep and broad understanding of all those different factors, which means that assessing the video clip of the operation is a very complicated process. In order to identify and assess the video clips of the operation, we have developed certain technologies. They can identify the medical devices and anatomical structures and gauzes and movement of the devices, and all that kind of movement can be recognized at the same time. We have recruited, actually we have collected a number of video clips and developed the algorithm for assessment. And another thing that we are working on is developing a real surgery, which is a platform on which the doctors can practice. And another thing that we are working on is a video recording system. As for the operation, we can have the operations saved in the data. But when you assess the video clips of the operations, you have to standardize first. And in order to support that, we have this archival system developed. What differentiates us from other companies is that we are developing technologies that can cover the starting process of the surgery down to the end of the surgery. Our company is working with other partners and research labs. We have assessed 1,000 gastric cancer surgeries, and as for the static videos, if it's a static images, it's more than 200 million. So video clip assessment requires very labor-intensive efforts, and based on the assessment that we have done and the work that we have done, we have improved the quality of our system and program. We have a number of researchers working together. So we were able to develop a good AI algorithm working with them. And last year, we were selected as a top-tier company, actually the winner of the challenge. And we grabbed the first position in the medical conference last week. So when it comes to the surgery video assessment, I believe that we have achieved a good outcome. The market is growing, and the surgery has been shifted to the robot and laparoscopic surgeries, which means that the target itself is growing. And if we target only 5% of the market, the number of cases that we target is 450,000 cases. It shows that the market itself is very big. And as for us, we have a good infrastructure and good database, and we can prove the technology earlier than later, which means that we can penetrate into the global market without much difficulty. And we have a very good network to penetrate the worldwide market. And we are also collaborating with other medical centers and labs so that our systems can be applied in broad sectors. And this is what we have in our mind. Once we have technology available in the market, we will be able to accumulate the data, and using the data we can upgrade our system, which can lead to a virtual cycle for further development. And this will help us facilitate the development of the technology in the future. We are focusing on GI surgery, but it will continue to expand, and we will diversify the products to be the market leader in the future. This is the last slide. It shows what we are aimed at. Using all the technologies, we are trying to come up with a new platform so that we can improve the outcome of the patient after surgery. That's what we have in our mind, and that's the motto of our company. This brings us to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
네, 휴톰의 대표이시자 연세대학교 현무진 의과대학
CEO of hutom and professor at Yonsei University Medical School and Surgical Department, Professor Hyung, talked about unveiling surgery through digital innovation. So we will now welcome the fourth presenter of the third session. It's Michael Langer, Head of Search Evaluation and In-Licensing of Pear Therapeutics. He will be talking about PDT, pioneering a new field of medicine.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me today. I think this is working. Awesome. All right, I'm going to share my screen. My name is Michael Langer, and I'm on the corporate development team at Pear Therapeutics, where I run our search evaluation and in-licensing function. And today I'm going to give a bit of a presentation about where we see digital therapeutics going, and also an overview of Pear in general too. So just to start things off, I think it's important to highlight some of the really important things that have been happening around the healthcare space in the last several years, and what that means in terms of how that can affect where software can go in healthcare. So here's a couple of trends that we're seeing. One of the biggest is that 90% of US has 3.8 trillion in annual healthcare expenditures, and that's for people with chronic and mental health conditions, which is a significant portion of the healthcare spending that's happening. There's also an enormous transition to telemedicine. So the number of people who have used telemedicine has doubled from 39.4% before COVID, but then also about 80% post-quarantine. There's also a huge provider shortage. This is something that has enormous implications, especially for areas like substance use disorder and insomnia, where there's tens of millions of patients with only a few thousand or less trained specialists. The other thing is technology is pervasive. There's an enormous amount of Americans that are spending an average of almost 6 hours a day using their phones, which is really bringing us towards having bigger data drives, as well as having increased engagement in this capacity as well. So where does this leave a company like Pear? So I want to give just a little bit of a background of our company and just digital therapeutics in general. So what Pear Therapeutics does is we're a prescription software company that creates digital interventions to treat different diseases. And we test these out in clinical trials that are randomized in nature so that we can show that they actually are able to improve outcomes. We then take them through the regulatory process so that they're able to be regulated, and then ultimately prescribed by clinicians. So the first areas that we've been exploring and that we've already gotten several FDA authorizations around are in addiction, where we have a authorization for the treatment of substance use disorder. Then we also have one for the treatment of opioid use disorder. And then finally, most recently, we got one for the treatment of chronic insomnia. All of these use different treatment modalities ranging from cognitive behavioral therapy, which is working on the underlying behavioral treatment of these kinds of patients, contingency management in our addiction products, which is creating built-in incentives in the program, and then also tracking different data aspects of these patients so that we can, over time, understand them better and then hopefully able to intervene as needed in a way that can be very meaningful. We also have other areas that we're starting to explore that are in the earlier stages, like pain, where we've created virtual reality applications that are able to work and reduce things like acute and chronic pain by introducing stimuli in the environment. And then we've also been working on the oncology space as well. And the opportunities here are plentiful, and I'll drop into that later in the presentation. So I just want to get a little bit deeper into what exactly are prescription digital therapeutics. And there's really 5 main tenets that define this. So the first is that it's able to utilize digital technology to improve human health. The next is that it's able to be tested in randomized controlled trials. And then also that it's FDA authorized, safe, and effective. It's also reimbursed via product-specific codes. And then finally, it's able to provide real-time feedback to clinicians. We're seeing a huge change in healthcare, and over the last 100 years, we've seen this continually grow and grow over time. In the 1900s, we saw the introduction of molecules, small molecules. In the 1980s, biologics. In the 2000s, the cell and gene therapies. But in the 2020s, we see prescription therapeutics as one of the next huge modalities to change how we think about healthcare. So what is this really disrupting overall? Because it's disrupting an enormous amount of different key stakeholders. So this has the potential, and already is, changing things for clinicians, where we're able to improve reach by allowing broader patient impact. We're also having more reimbursable events for dashboard interactions. This also has huge implications on payers. It has the ability to reduce overall healthcare costs, as well as fill gaps in care across large populations. And finally, of course, patients. It allows for 24/7 remote access without fear of stigma, which is a big factor in a lot of different diseases. And then it also has favorable side effect profiles versus medications, which is one of the huge aspects of digital interventions that's really compelling. So where is Pear right now? Right now, we're the first mover and leader in this space of prescription digital therapeutics. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 authorized, FDA-authorized products. We also have multiple products that are already commercialized, which includes our program Reset, Reset-O, and Somrus. These have very large addressable markets because addiction and chronic insomnia are very prevalent worldwide. We have a very broad and deep pipeline that goes beyond even addiction and insomnia. Right now, we have 14 product candidates with the potential to improve care across multiple therapeutic areas. We have also created an end-to-end platform, which has allowed us the ability to have a scalable infrastructure to discover, develop, and deliver PDTs to patients. We're focusing on scale. While right now, we have the opportunity to go from 3 to 17 prescription digital therapeutics, we see this being able to get to over 100 different areas, and we're very excited about the opportunity and the potential of what we can do in healthcare and how we can impact patients. The biggest thing right now for Pear is continuing our first mover advantage. We've been able to demonstrate adoption by patients, clinicians, and payers, and we intend to continue to do this across additional geographies as well as indications. And so we're very excited to talk today at this conference, and we're hoping that people get excited about it as well. So let's talk about some of our competitive advantages. We have a tech platform which allows for payer and provider integration. We also have a very strong IP portfolio, which has created about 20 owned and licensed patents. We have a defensible moat via our regulatory pathway, which requires clinical evidence. And then we also, like in tech, are able to collect quite a lot of data, which is able to help improve over time the products that we're using and can have huge impact on the patients that we're working with as well. We've created a really unique team that goes across many different fields. All of our executives come from backgrounds where they either have life science or tech in terms of the places that they worked, And we have a best-in-class investor list that includes different investors from a global perspective that includes folks like SoftBank, Novartis, Temasek, and many more. We have about 200 employees right now, and our offices are located in Boston, San Francisco, and Raleigh. So just to reiterate, we have 3 FDA-authorized products, 14 candidates that are in the pipeline, and we see 100+ opportunities that we can use leveraging our platform. These are very large opportunities. The markets in addiction and insomnia are great, and so we hope that by capturing that, we're able to make some really significant change to these markets by introducing real, true innovation via the way of having digital as a means of thinking about patient care. So I'm going to go back to our product candidates that I was mentioning earlier in terms of the kinds of programs that we have. So I already talked about our substance use disorder and opioid use disorder and chronic insomnia programs, but we have quite a few more. Some of the more later stage programs that we have where we've already had proof of concept studies are in schizophrenia, acute and chronic pain, as well as irritable bowel syndrome. We also have some nice data that we see as being very promising in alcohol use disorder, anxiety, as well as migraine and multiple sclerosis. We see all of these as really unique opportunities for Pear, and we're very excited about the potential about what they can do for the markets. The other interesting aspect of what Pear has been doing is we've also been collecting and building a platform enhancement package around different digital biomarkers. So we've done some deals around voice where we're able to track different metrics in voice, be able to track progression in disease. Similarly, in keystroke, we are able to track the keystrokes of the patient to track different aspects of disease. And then we also have adherence sensors with a company called eTechRx, and then also physiological monitoring with a company called Empatica. All of these are really unique pieces of technology that we think have really exciting potential for what they can do in terms of the data capture and then what that can mean about patients and for patients. So I want to just talk a little bit about our Pdt Engine. So we've talked now about the different pipeline that we've developed as well as the programs that are coming too. But really what allows us to be able to do this and to do that at scale is the platform that we've developed. So our Pdt Engine allows us to be able to discover, develop, and commercialize PDTs at scale. So we've created a very comprehensive component library of therapeutic and digital biomarker modalities. We have an in-licensing engine to access new technologies. We've created a remote clinical trial infrastructure. And we're also a participant in the FDA's pre-certification pilot program. We have quality systems compatible with 21 CFR 820 and iOS 13485. We have a platform capable of hosting hundreds of PDTs by Pear and third parties. This is through our clinician dashboard, our patient services center and specialty pharmacy, our data infrastructure, and access to claims data, our telemedicine integration and field sales force, and finally, our modular payer contracts and adjudication of value-based agreements. So let's also talk just a little about how do some of these things work? How do these actually improve efficacy? So I'm going to dive into our programs Reset and Reset-O, which are our programs that are defined by making treatment claims for SUD and OUD. So for the Reset and Reset-O program, we use what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a really important technique used by psychologists, which allows people to work on their underlying behaviors. This includes introducing them to different situations and how they might act in that situation and how they might change their behaviors in that situation, so not to get wrapped up in a situation where they have an outcome that may not be desirable towards making improvements in treatment. We also have Fluency Training. So Fluency Training is basically us teaching them about the disorder so that the patient is actually able to understand fundamentally what's going on with their disease. You would be surprised, oftentimes patients don't really understand this, and so it's a very important component of this. We also implement contingency management. Contingency management allows us to be able to create built-in incentives for the patients. So as they're going through the treatment and doing the CBT and the fluency training, we're actually really motivating them in ways beyond just the engagement of the app, but actually creating points and allowing them to ultimately spin a wheel, which can get them gift cards as they are able to go through these treatments to continue to keep them really interested in what they're doing. And this is an important part because oftentimes in treatment you can have a lot of patients that drop off, and so it's very important to make this as engaging as possible. We also have a craving and trigger assessment. So during the day, the patient's able to check in on the app and is able to actually show what are the triggers that are actually leading them to have a craving. Over time, this becomes very important because we then really understand the patient more, because it allows us to get to see what are the things that are causing the patient to feel like they need to use. We also have the clinician aspect of things. This is tracking real-world evidence, concept proficiency, the cravings and triggers, but then also the urine and drug screenings and appointments. All of this is what's comprised in our Reset and Reset O program, and I'm going to just walk through some of the clinical data behind it. So Reset and Reset O shows clinical data that's extremely strong and even stronger real-world outcomes. So right now there's been 2 clinical trials for Reset, and it's been able to show that it improves abstinence, and we've also been able to show that 82% of patients that were able to retain therapy for Reset O. This is able to show up to 100% of substitution for clinician time and up to 12 months of continuous use. In terms of the real-world use here, we were able to see 88% of patients abstinent at 12 weeks, 85% retained therapy at 12 weeks, and then 62% in terms of reduction in inpatient hospitalization over 6 months, and then 20% reduction in emergency department visits at 6 months. We've also been able to demonstrate commercial traction. We've done over 20,000 prescriptions. There's been 66% of the modules completed. 700 different prescribers have been able to prescribe our treatment, and we have over 25 million lives, which has amounted to about, which we're able to show in different studies, has about a cost savings of 2,150. Let me just wrap up by talking about one of our final products that has just recently come out. And this is our product called Somryst. Somryst is a treatment for substance use disorder. It's FDA authorized. It's been examined in 29 different completed or ongoing studies. It delivers a drug-free treatment without the risk of dependence and inappropriate long use, which is a real problem in insomnia right now. It also addresses supply and demand mismatch in insomnia care. It has long-term durable clinical benefits and also is first-line treatment for clinical guidelines. Just to give some of the stats, we've been able to show significant improvement in insomnia and depression endpoints. The decrease in severity in insomnia symptoms is 45%. Decrease in depression symptoms was 50%. The decrease in anxiety symptoms, also quite comparable at 45%. And it was able to show durability in insomnia, depression, and anxiety up to 18 months. In terms of real-world use, there's a decrease in the severity of insomnia symptoms, decrease in the time to sleep onset, as well as decrease in undesired waking from sleep. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the end now and just talk about where does this leave Pear and where does this leave digital therapeutics as an industry. So we see Reset, Reset O, and Somryst as really just the beginning. Our engine, which I discussed above, has great capabilities of what is possible in terms of making change and being able to really take this idea and this entire industry to scale. So right now we have 3 FDA authorized programs and we have 14 other ones in our pipeline. We see many more opportunities, and that's why we have a very healthy acquisitions engine where we're constantly evaluating assets and looking for the next best-in-class programs to be able to bring into the company. We also are always looking at innovating inside the company as well. And by having both of these 2 areas of innovation, this allows us to stay fresh. When we think about the future of digital therapeutics, we see a new arena where we can get far-reaching patients as well as treat hard to get patients in disease states that can oftentimes be very difficult to treat. Digital treatments have a very incredible potential impact for patients, and we're already starting to see that through the beginning with products like Reset-O and Tomocube. We'd love to see what can happen in Korea as well, and if people have any interest in talking to us about collaborating or anything like that, or if you just have any questions, please reach out to me via email. I'm happy to talk more. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
네, 페어 테라퓨틱스의 마이클 레버 책임자님의
Yes,
발표 함께
that was
들으셨습니다.
Head of Search Evaluation and In-Licensing, Michael Langer from Pear
다섯
Therapeutics.
번째 발표를
So we have arrived at the fifth
연설문과
presentation of
다섯 번째 발표가 끝난
session 3.
뒤에는 역시 패널 토론으로
After this presentation, we will have panel discussion
나누도록
again.
하겠습니다. 서울시 유튜브 채널에 올려주신
And
여러분의
we will try
의견과
to
질문
entertain the questions you have posted on the YouTube chat during the panel discussion session. So please stay with us.
네, 오래 기다리신 제3
Yes,
세션의
we are going to welcome the last speaker of session 3. It is Digital Health Manager Roberta Sarno from Asia Pacific Medical Technology Association. He will be talking about bridging digital health solutions to the market, best practices, and gaps.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session. My name is Roberta Sarno. I manage Digital Health Committee at APAC Med. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at the Seoul International Biomedical Conference this year. I'm really happy to be here and be able to talk about how to bring digital health solutions to the market. So before we start, a little bit about what you can expect from this session. So we will try to set the context together, then we will go into the specificities of regulatory policies for digital health, as well as reimbursement policies for digital health, looking at different markets and focusing on APAC specifically. So who is APAC Med and what's the role we have in Asia, in the medical technology space and in digital health? So APAC Med is the only regional trade association for the medical technology industry. We have more than 230 member companies, including 20 of the top 30 medtech companies worldwide. We also have a large startup community with over 130 members. And we support all the stakeholders in different initiatives, from building and sharing knowledge, building capabilities, interacting with regulators, with policymakers, and with providers and other key players and key deciders in the healthcare ecosystem. Recently, a bit less than 2 years ago, we also introduced the Digital Health Committee to support our members and the entire community on digital health specifically. We cover 18 countries with our work. We have more than 75 companies who are actively part of this committee and more than 200 individual members. So we work on a number of topics from reimbursement, regulatory approval that we are covering today, but also other topics like cybersecurity, interoperability, data. So why are digital health policies important and why we are talking about them today? So, there are no doubts that digital health is booming currently, and even more now during COVID. We saw, many different digital health applications, technologies, solutions supporting, patients to access to a better and more personalized care. So the technology is there, but the policies sometimes are not. So it's important to work all together to achieve a better environment in order to get life-saving solutions approved and reimbursed. And of course, then there is another key challenge that is linked to the usage of those technologies. We are not covering that part today. But regulatory approval and reimbursement are crucial. If we really want to bring those solutions to patients, we need to have a fit-for-purpose way to look at them from a regulatory approval perspective, but also from a coverage perspective, because these solutions are often expensive, and then coverage is really important when we have to discuss, real use from patient. So let's start with regulatory policies for digital health. How is the situation today, and how are companies interacting with the key regulators and introducing their new digital health solutions on the market? So you see here a cover of a paper. This is a paper, the Digital Health Regulation in Asia Pacific. It's a paper that we published at the beginning of this year. And we provide a review of the approach taken by different markets when it comes to regulating digital health. So the idea is starting from what exists, reviewing that, highlighting best practices and gaps by looking at international recommendation, specifically from the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum. Then we map how the countries are doing, and then we suggest a framework. We provide our own recommendations to the regulators in order to better approve and regulate digital health solutions. So you see here a number of countries and also a list of different guidelines that countries are implementing or have implemented already in their market. So definitely, all the countries are putting digital health in their agenda, even though there is sometimes work to do in order to ensure a better regulation of these new solutions. In the paper, in this first paper, we focus on 3 markets specifically: Australia, Japan, and Singapore. And we analyze 6 key elements of software and digital health regulation. So number 1, qualification. So when a software should be considered a medical device, because not all software should be considered and regulated as medical device. So in this case, Australia is doing very well, and Japan and Singapore have implemented some definition, but they could still, optimize the way they provide guidance on qualification. Risk classification is also very crucial, and here the 3 countries, we put them in red because they were still working at the time we published the paper on risk classification for software as medical device, even though I must say that Singapore recently implemented some updates to his own guidelines, so this red should now not be read anymore, but the paper was published, of course, before this update. Multiple functions are also really crucial. So, some software products have multiple functions, and not all the functions should be regulated, because not all functions have a medical device intended use. So in this case, the 3 markets we consider should really try to better describe when and which type of function should be regulated as medical device. Think about your phone. In your phone, some apps, some functions have a medical device intended use, and in this case, the regulatory authority should regulate them, but all the rest should not be considered by the regulatory agency. Alternative pathways for digital health. This is also very important. So digital health solutions are unique in their nature, very different from traditional drugs and traditional medical devices. So we do advocate, and we support the approach of the 3 countries because they all introduce alternative pathways to review digital health. And especially when we talk about these, software-based solutions, they undergo, very frequent updates. So having a specific review pathway is really, really important in order not to delay the access to market and patients. Pre-submission consultation is also very important. The three markets are doing very well. So this is related to the opportunities that companies have to discuss with regulatory bodies before the submission is made. In the paper, we also, provide a couple of use cases, and one is the example of Pear Therapeutics. Pear Therapeutics is the first company, the first digital therapeutics company to be approved by the regulator in Singapore. It was approved last year. So the idea is to allow communication on, data and expectations even before the submission is made. This is really important. And then the last point is providing guidance specific to artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is very important. These technologies are unique and they should, be regulated in a very precise and fit for purpose way. So Japan and Singapore are already, they already have guidelines for AI companies and machine learning developers. So given the analysis we made on the three markets, what are our recommendations to regulators? What should regulators do? So of course, I will not go into the details of all this, but we suggest three macro recommendations to the authorities. Number one, working on fundamental building blocks for software-focused regulatory framework. So, for example, implement an approach to clearly define when a software should be considered a medical device, then classify it in a very specific way, in a way that is not, coming from old classifications of medical devices, for example, and then also introduce policies that only cover the functions with a medical device intended use for software with multiple functions. The second, big bucket is related to the pathways to support rapid regulatory review of digital health and their modification. And in this case, we also suggest markets to implement recognition and reliance models. So let's say a market is reviewing a software or a digital health product or a digital therapeutic, and then it could be useful to look at what other countries are doing and leveraging the studies and the analysis they made. And then the third point is around collaboration and convergence opportunities. So here it's important to collaborate. It's important to foster a dialogue. So APAC-Med is, is trying to play a role here in order to really foster these collaborations between public and private, and also, supporting the different players to talk to each other, which is often, the game changer. So talking about collaborations, we have a number of collaborations ongoing with HSA Singapore, with TGA Australia, and we are now starting a new project to share knowledge and facilitate a dialogue with ASEAN countries. Also importantly for your market, so we have a paper on China and Korea that is going to be published in the next few weeks. So it's coming, and it's basically, it provides a review of the regulatory landscape in China and Korea. We also provide some use cases, some examples of local companies who managed to, to undergo the regulatory approval process. So it will be my pleasure to share it with the community as soon as it's published. And we also have one for India that is currently under review and is going to be published in the next few months. From a reimbursement perspective, so and why the two topics are linked. So first of all, today there are many solutions that are approved by regulatory bodies, but they are not reimbursed. And this means that often, they are not used by patients, by healthcare professionals, because they are not covered. So this is a very important point, and probably one of the, the main issues when it comes to usage of these solutions. So similarly to what we do with in the field of regulatory affairs, in reimbursement, we advocate for a dedicated framework for value assessment and reimbursement of clinical grade solutions in Asia. Currently, this is all lacking, okay? So if in the regulatory field, we can see a number of guidelines and, regulatory policies, for reimbursement and value assessment, this is all lacking. There is no framework that is specific for digital health, and that is ensuring reimbursement or, looking at reimbursement of digital health technologies in several markets. So definitely we can see that Asia is unlocking telemedicine reimbursement, for example. We saw that during COVID, but when we look beyond telemedicine, then there is not much. The other solutions are not covered today. And even if we look beyond Asia, so Germany is often taken as an example because they have a digital health reimbursement pathway called DGAV. There is a temporary measure to, to reimburse and then at the same time evaluate the outcomes of digital health technologies. But even in this case, there are some challenges. So definitely a very important, but still young and fragmented space. And if we look at some, how companies are managing to get their solutions reimbursed in such a, incomplete scenario, then we have a number of examples. And here I just show one, the example of Artflow. This is a company that managed to get reimbursement 2 years after being approved in Japan. And these are ad hoc initiatives. It was approved in 2018 by PMDA, the regulator in Japan, and then through collaboration with university hospital, with professional associations, and by providing clinical study results in key markets, they managed finally to get reimbursement from the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare in 2018. So definitely an interesting example, but showing that some, harmonization and official frameworks is strongly needed, because otherwise, companies have to basically provide data and build their value and demonstrate their value to the different stakeholders by themselves. So what we suggest, and also this also comes by from observing this type of examples from the industry. Definitely, value assessment frameworks for digital health are needed. They should. So the way stakeholders, and in particular, policymakers and ministries of health should look at digital health is trying to assess their value, not only from a, safety, clinical effectiveness, of course, this is important, but also from an economic impact, the patient and social aspects, from usability, and so on. So many different elements should be considered when looking at digital health. And this is new, it's very different from traditional drugs and medical devices. And also when we look at policy recommendations, our policy recommendations, we of course, we do advocate for a fit-for-purpose reimbursement framework for digital health. This is really important. It's important that all the countries align on that, and it's important that each country implements a framework to better assess the value and cover these new solutions. So we have a paper that we published again, in this field. Is available on our website, and I'm certainly happy to discuss more about that if you are interested. But in a nutshell, we suggest a 3-step approach. First of all, countries should look at a situational analysis. They should, first of all, categorize digital health, so define digital health solutions and what is key for their market, what kind of digital health solutions should be implemented, should be covered, and so on. Then framing the opportunity and the impact these solutions could have on their market from different perspectives as well. As we said before, not only from a clinical perspective, but also from a social, economic perspective, and so on. And then map to healthcare archetypes. This is something that we introduce in the paper. We have two archetypes. One is, related to a mature market, and we take Australia, and the other is considers immature market, and we take India. So in the two cases, the roadmap could be a little bit different. Second step is planning. So planning to incorporate, so it's important to incorporate digital health technologies into national planning cycle in order to ensure funding and reimbursement, then introduce a multi-stakeholder task force, and identify some local stakeholders, key experts that could serve as a model in order to show the impact of reimbursed digital health solutions for the country. And then third step is more like executing and monitoring, following up after the execution. So it's important that policymakers publish a clear roadmap in order to ensure that life-saving solutions provided by companies are covered. This is very important for if we really want to make these solutions affordable and then used. Then it's also important to implement and to introduce a workforce with the right skills and capabilities when it comes to digital health. Again, this is all new, so we all have to learn, and it's important to to have dedicated teams and team members in order to achieve this kind of changes in the markets. And then implementing monitoring process, for sure, this is important in order to follow up and to see after 6 months, after 1 year, how is the process going, what can be done in order to better cover digital health solutions. So with that, I am at the end of my presentation. I would like to thank all of you. Again, if you have any questions, or if you would like to discuss about these topics, feel free to reach out. And yeah, I wish you a great continuation of this conference, and have a good day all. Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다. 디지털 헬스 솔루션 시장에
Yes,
적용된
thank you.
실제 사례를
We
만나봤습니다.
have heard different presentations on actual application of digital technology on medical devices in the era of smart healthcare, and we learn a lot from the fifth presentation by Dr. Roberta Sarno. So we now heard from all 5 speakers. So in session 3, we grappled with the topic of direction of medical devices innovation in the era of smart healthcare. Based on the presentations and the exchanges we had so far, we're going to have a panel discussion. And now I will introduce the moderator for the final panel discussion of the day, and I will also introduce the panelists. I have Professor Beop-Min Kim of Department of Biomedical Engineering of Korea University. He is also CEO of Korean Medical Device Development Fund. And I will welcome our speakers again to the stage, Dr. Kiwon Lee of Ybrain, and Dr. Hyung Park of Tomocube, and Dr. Woojin Hyung of Yonsei University. So, should I begin? Yes. Good afternoon. I am Professor Beop-Min Kim of Department of Biomedical Engineering of Korea University. And I'm also heading the government-level initiative Korea Medical Device Development Fund. So in session 3, the topic is medical device, and I understand you worked very hard to put together the program for the session 3, and I was really surprised to see the outcome because it covered wide gamut of different subtopics, electroceuticals, AI microscopy, and surgical innovation, and prescription digital therapeutics, and other health solutions that even covers reimbursement and fee structure. So I enjoyed the presentation immensely. It was quite interesting for me as well. And we do have experts with us, and I understand there were some questions posted by the viewers on YouTube. So if you can please show me the question posted by YouTube, it would be very much appreciated. And before I can get those questions, I want to thank the speakers for their very excellent presentation. I look forward to this discussion because we will cover very common and universal topics. And I think the session 3 encompasses all the important issues in the field of digital health. So new digital devices that were not there in the past continue to emerge in a single health insurance system. This leads to different issues regarding reimbursement and fees and creation of profitable business models. So some business people, some entrepreneurs find it difficult to create profitability in Korea, so they choose to go abroad to seek profit. So in this regard, we have 3 CEOs or CTOs from 3 different companies. So I was wondering what kind of business models you have. You touched upon them briefly during your presentation. Can you share more about your business model and business strategy regarding going to an overseas market? I want to ask Dr. Lee to answer first.
네, 저희는 이제 약 8년 이상의 임상을 통해서
We have 8-year clinical trials, and then we have 2 studies. We have a small medical devices that can treat depression, and it's about to be commercialized. When we have a look at the Korean market, the conclusion or judgment that I make is this. As for the conventional technologies, that's kind of, we have a good system for the conventional ones, but not so good for the new technologies, especially whenever we enter the market. Since we do not have a good system to facilitate its entry into the market. When we have a look at the Japanese market, which has the similar system, they have a kind of a separate market that can allow the new products to be introduced into the market under the accountability of the healthcare professional. So for other markets, they have a system to facilitate a new product or application to be introduced into the market. I believe that we need to introduce a similar system in Korea. That's what I think. And then from the product perspective, we need to do something that we have done to tackle COVID-19. We can create a huge amount of data, and if we are in the urgent or emergency situation, we can develop a new product at a very rapid pace. So taking advantage of the technologies that we have many different platform-based products. And we also have the technology to create the data or build the data. And once we have the system that allow us to create the new data. I believe that the new technologies can be introduced into the market without much difficulty in the future. We try to create the success cases despite all the challenges that we have. Now we also try to get our product approved in the Japanese market too at the same time.
This was already mentioned. So I think in Korea, we are at a very unique situation where broad scope welfare and industry feasibility or profitability are at the conflicting point. So if the balance is tipped, that can create a vicious circle that gets repeated. So I want to ask similar question to Mr. Park Young-keun from Tomocube. You mentioned you are targeting research market, to including CBC. You are thinking of a diagnostic device that use AI. So how much is it realized, and how can you also touch upon how you're responding to reimbursement? So in the research market, our product is already available. Our research purpose microscopes are sold in 28 different countries, and papers are being authored on the topic. So this new innovative technologies are what we are trying to leverage to go into a new market, and that is quite difficult. Because even when the technology is super, you have to pay for the technology, right? So they look for reference, already established use cases. So even with the greatest product, you cannot really sell that well in the beginning, because buyers or people who buy these devices see huge risk. So because of this risk, they have to understand very specific benefits. So usually the reaction I get is, oh, the product seems to be really great, but I have to wait and see how other people use it. So in the beginning, we focused on research microscope. The early adopters, usually who are opinion leaders, decide to purchase them. However hard we try to produce the product, in the beginning, the product quality is not perfect. So by interacting with these early adopters, we improved our product, and we also had greater focus on the area of application. And again, if you make your product really, really low priced, you can gain a little bit of market share, but you can never be a leader. So I wanted to make our product high quality even when the price is high, so that we can have better promise in the future. And regarding reimbursement, companies like us and other people who are trying to create startup and establish product, startup, what is the strategy for you? That is the key question, and we have twofold perspectives on this. We're still thinking about that. So there are a very well-established market, and are we going to go into that market with new product? So the scale of the market is big, but the barrier to entry is high, because invested interest stakeholders created well-structured defense mechanisms, and new entrants cannot go in there. And second, there is a new kind of market with not enough scale. You can go into that market easily, but the market will not scale, will not grow. So the first strategy, like Professor Kim mentioned, when you try to do the first strategy, the reimbursement or fee is the obstacle. There are already existing options with optimal fee level. One does not want to, or payer does not want to give higher reimbursement, higher fees. So a very new noble value that justifies higher fees or higher reimbursement should be there to gain profitability. But second strategy is slightly different. In Korea, US, Japan, and Europe, for new technology, government officials or regulators are quite open, but the markets or the buyers are not ready. So they have to take a different directions, a different approach And what are you going to do to create profit? What we choose to do was quite opposite to what usual, typical venture company or startup companies would do. They usually go for a niche market, but we thought when we go to niche market, we cannot grow. Even when we become one product profitable, we cannot hit it with the second product. Instead of going into a niche market, we will instead go for a market that has enormous number of test volume and then gain market share. So of course it comes with its own set of risks, but we set our target onto a larger market, so that's why we set for CBC. So in Korea, we drew a conclusion that we cannot really create big enough profit, so we turn our attention to the US. Regarding new technology, of course, Korean market can be an excellent testbed. As a market, it is attractive. Using AI, extracting molecular information for immunohistoric staining or IHC test, it is quite feasible. And we do have internal plan to get approval on that indication. So I'm giving a very long-winded explanation and answer, but the gist is, even as one company, for different products, we take different strategy and approaches, and we cannot wait forever for regulation to change, so we have to take diverse paths.
Thank you. We have many different products, and I believe that we need to tailor our approach to different products. And as for three of you, I believe that the product that you are developing are very different from the ones that we are used to, which means that you have to explore the new market. And to Dr. Hyung, I'd like to ask a question, which is similar but a bit different from the one that I asked. You are developing a software to help the surgeons, and we have many different types of softwares. And from the clinician's point of view, do you believe that doctors are open to that? Is it acceptable? Usually the surgeons are rather conservative, which means that they are afraid of making some changes. So how do you overcome that challenge? And as for the AI-based software, how can you make it a revenue-creating model? Do you have a special plan or strategy for that? I do not have any different ideas from the ones of the previous two speakers, but let me add some comment. We need to have evidence to the technologies that we have. Second, as for the evidence, we need to show what kind of benefit it can create or generate. So first and foremost, we need to have a very firm and strong evidence, which cannot be done by individual companies. As for the evidence, we need to go through clinical trials in order to build evidence. So what is important to have the strategy to have that evidence? And let's say that we have a secured evidence, but we need to have different strategies for different markets. Then do you believe that we can have different strategies for different markets? I think that we have to. Different markets have different regulations, which means that we have to have different strategies for that. Korean market is different from the other countries, so we need to tailor different approaches for that. So what is best is the sharing best practice. Let's say that we have a certain product developed, and it can be applied to not only Koreans but also to the US people. Then as long as we have that evidence, we do not need to run a separate clinical trials targeting different ethnic groups. So building the evidence is important first and foremost. And as for the surgeons, you are true that surgeons are very conservative. How can you change them and try to make them adopt it? So we are focusing the key opinion leaders. So as long as we show that or demonstrate even the key opinion leaders or skilled surgeons use our system, then other doctors will adopt. So that's what we want to do. And also we need to show that adopting a certain technology can lead to a better or different outcome for the patient. That's what we need to do. Okay. We need to show that it can lead to the better outcome for the patient, right? But that's not something that we can do with the AI-based medical devices. And at the same time, we need to show the cost-benefit advantage too, and it takes a lot of time and money. And for the digital healthcare, we have startups. They do not have enough fund. During the initial stage, many of them suffer from the shortage of funding. And as for all of you, I believe that you understand what I mean. And during the first years, can you tell me how you overcome the challenges that you have had so far? And Dr. Hyung, can you answer the question first? Okay, let me answer first. I'm a clinician, so I'm kind of different from others. That means that I have some insight into that. That's one of the benefits that I have. And another advantage that I have is this. When we introduce a certain technology into a market, we should be able to assess the technology on a fair ground. Let's say that I'm a surgeon. If I assess certain tools for the surgeons, I believe that I can do a good job. But if we lead or make the internal medicine doctors make some estimation or assessment of a surgeon's tools, I don't think they can make a good job of assessment. So we should be able to have a good ground for the assessment. The right people need to make assessment, and we need to make the right system for making assessment too. Okay, can you answer that question as well? And as for us, optical hardware and AI software are combined to make a good diagnosis, which means that our scope can be expanded too large. But when I look back, I feel sorry about the quality of the product. In the early days, I thought that we were happy with the product quality, but from the buyer's point of view, their expectation was higher. If we came up with a much better quality product, we could have been able to save time and money in the early days. Let's say that as for the endoscope, microscope, for the lab, we had come up with a good one. But when we entered the market, proof of concept was identified or much later than expected. And whenever there was a need for improvement, it took longer time too. Business model, funding, they are important, but what is most important is customer satisfaction. So if we had a better quality product, in the first place that met the expectation of the customer, we could have saved time and money. Thank you. I believe that other people who wants to run evidence like yours may learn a lot from what you said. I have run our project, and whenever I look back, I regret. I think that I would have done something very differently if I got a chance again to do a certain project. So as a person who runs a business, I believe that you have a lot to regret and wanted to do differently right now. I believe that I hit the point. As for the healthcare industry, it's rather conservative, which means that we need to have a good result very quickly and also get it recognized by the key opinion leaders as quickly as possible. So if I am given a chance again, I will focus on it. Recently, we have a better environment for investment, and we have more money or investment coming into the bio industry. And I hope that we have a better system so that qualified companies can survive. And lastly, I want to add one comment. Whenever we talk about the regulations, we believe that we need to have a good reference for the Korean market. So up to now, we try to find answers to the questions that we have when it comes to the running of the business. But when we talk about the digital health, we need to think of the regulations of Japan, US, and other countries as well.
Do we have enough time for another question, or should we wrap up? No time limit? Okay. In fact, we do have a number of regulators, including Ministry of Food Drug Safety, and we have HERA, National Insurance Service, and other health industry research institute. So we do have different regulators. And maybe you have read this from the news. There are a number of products in digital health, AI, digital therapeutics. So none of them are given the fee level. None of them are given the optimal reimbursement. That has been mentioned a number of times. Many of the policymakers are aware of the issue. But it takes time, of course, to get those regulations sorted out. This has recently mentioned that regarding digital medical device, maybe we can consider introducing a system of innovative reimbursement or innovative fees. And they're reviewing possibility of introducing pilot system next year. So there are different movements made in the field, but we do not really see the impact. We do not see any tangible outcome. I understand that because I converse with other companies as well. And if you can send a message to a policymaker or regulators regarding what needs to be done fast to make this market more vibrant, what would that be? We talked about MCN and DBG. So these are the systems or new fees or reimbursements are allowed. So there are a lot of different options and paths taken. You must be thinking about these as well. So maybe I will start with Dr. Lee.
As for the medical devices or technologies, it can improve the efficacy and the outcome, but at the same time, it can enhance the cost benefit and efficiency of the time spent. So for the regulation framework, I believe that we need to adopt a different scheme, which means that if you can reduce the time for the regulatory approval, you may be flexible in operating the system that you have. And as for the reimbursement system in Korea, we need a room for improvement. So we can learn from Japan or the USA, which means that the healthcare professionals will take accountability for introducing a new product into the market. I believe that the kind of system needs to be introduced into the Korean market too.
Yes, to add briefly, there can be a conflict between two different industries. Our national insurance system is very, very well built, but it has some shortcomings in terms of promoting new innovative industry. So as someone in the middle, of course, we have to be cautious about increasing fees to facilitate innovative medical industry. In order to sustain competitiveness, maybe we can think about accumulating data, building reference in Korea. If it doesn't harm a patient, we can deregulate it drastically, and the policymakers or regulators can induce companies to make profit and unleash their potential in overseas market. Yes, it is a very important remark because medical industry is all about human lives. So we cannot really focus on industrial aspect of it. So because of that, of course, there should be a perfect balance between the two elements.
Last comment from Dr. Hyung. I'm going to talk from doctor's perspective. Whenever we have a new technology, it takes a long time. And get a new technology from the new technology, or have the additional technology from the existing one, it takes shorter. So once you have a new technology in the market, it can become some kind of legacy. So based on that, you can understand how to do with the regulation and how to do a better job of assessment. And second, in the Korean market, we have a number of startups. They are developing new technologies, and for them to be presented into the global market, the standards of the Korean market can be applied to the overseas market. That's something we need to keep in mind. Let's say that we have a hospitalization cost is very low. However, in the US, once you're hospitalized, it takes like $3,000 per day. So if you have a very good technology that can reduce the hospitalization days, it can be very attractive to the US market, but not to the Korean market. So you have to take the different features of different market into consideration when you evaluate the technology. You should not apply a certain standard, especially apply to the Korean market only, as long as you want to present it into the global market. Thank you so much. We have many different medical devices that are being assessed or examined, and more than 20,000 medical devices. And there are different categories and too many medical products or devices regulated by the regulations. But the market is expanding very rapidly too. And as for the regulations or those people who govern the regulations, I believe that they need to learn and try to come up with all the different technologies developed. And we have listened to different voices and opinions. As long as we deliver our feedback to them, I believe that the changes will take place, even though it's not as fast as you want it to be. Sorry that we are behind the schedule, but I believe we have a very constructive discussion, and this brings us to the end of today's conference. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights, and thank you those speakers in overseas foreign countries for joining us today. This brings us to the end of the conference. Thank you.